Okay, well, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's a beautiful day here in California, and at least from what I see, it looks like the rest of the U.S. is definitely running very quickly into summer. Today, we're going to be talking about retention, specifically in the mobile first world that we live in. And we've got Richard Shapiro, who's the founder and president of the Center for Client Retention, on the line. We're going to talk with you guys about Richard's model and all the fun stuff that he's got in store for us. So thank you today for joining in. Should be a good chat. So a little bit about me. My name is MoEngage. I am with MoEngage. We're a customer engagement solution. You can see some of our customers listed there, but what we do is we help companies like you see here send notifications, email, SMS messages, in-app pop-up messages, website on website engagement messages to customers to get them to do things. Right? Might be things like come back and check something out. It might be, hey, you left an item in your cart. It might be, hey, check out this new thing that we've got. So essentially, really what MoEngage does is we've got a platform, marketing platform that enables our customers to engage their end consumers with messaging of all types. So that's what we do. And then Richard, who's joining us today, we actually discovered Richard just cruising around the internet, and he and I started talking and found out that there's a ton of overlap with his philosophy and what's happening in the world of mobile. So with that said, we're really excited to put this together. Richard, I'll let you introduce yourself so you can tell the audience all about you and what you're about.
Sure, thank you, thank you, Aaron. First of all, Aaron is in the Sacramento area today in California, and I'm actually in downtown Manhattan. In case you hear any sirens, don't worry. So anyway, thank you for that, introduction, Aaron, to this important topic. And once again, my name is Richard Shapiro, and I'm founder and president, of the Center for Client Retention. And Aaron suggested that I share with you how I first learned about customer retention because I think it's an interesting story. And of course, when he asked, I said yes. I didn't have a choice, right? So when I was a young teenager, probably about 10 or 11, my dad owned a small men's clothing store in New Jersey, in the States. And every Saturday, my friends were playing sports. But I wasn't playing sports. I wasn't allowed to play sports on Saturday. I actually went to work with my dad. So every Saturday, I got dressed in a suit, drove to work with my dad at the beginning of the day, and I came home at the end of the day. What was my job? My job was being the cashier. It was a small store, so I was the only one at the cash register. But from the point of the cash register, I could view my father interacting with all the customers that came through his door. And it was a fun job because I was collecting money, and at the same time, I was learning from my dad. And I learned so many lessons from my dad that were important then in a physical store, but still apply today in this world of mobile engagement. The first lesson I learned is my father taught me that all customers are people first, customer second. Let me repeat that. That all customers are people first, customer second. So in the mobile engagement world, users are people first, user second. I think that's an important message to understand. Second thing is that my dad said it was important to welcome everybody into the store just like he'd welcome them into our home. So to my dad, the store was just an extension of our home, another place to make people feel welcome. In the mobile engagement world, it's also so critical from the first time they engage with a customer or a user or prospective customer to make sure that you make them feel welcome. The third thing my father taught me is it's critical to create a relationship or an emotional bond with customers. And if your mobile engagement strategy is created in a way to create this emotional connection, and I'm going to provide you 8 steps to do that, you're going to be much more successful, than your competitors. And talking about competitors, there's definitely more competition than ever. I don't think anybody would dispute that. And in addition, coupled with more competition, we have customers that are less loyal. So it's kind of a double whammy, as they say. You have more competition, less loyal customers, more options, and you also have customer acquisition costs that are extremely high in this multi-channel environment. So as I often have heard, Erwin say, it's so critical that brands learn how to engage with consumers or users with the right content on the right channel at the right time. And overall, there is no reason why you can't replicate an emotional connection and everything that my father taught me with mobile engagement if you just think about it in terms of these 8 steps that I'm going to go through. So I'm very excited to share with those 8 steps with you today. Erin, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Richard. Well, so, as Richard teed everything up, I mean, really today we're going to hear about his model, his 8 crucial steps to creating relationships. And that's really why we're here today. I think the format we're going to follow is Richard's going to share, these steps of his, and then I'm going to share some real world examples, what we've seen out in the wild, what companies are doing to actually put these things into action. So, one of the things that I hear a lot of especially from marketers is, hey, why retention versus acquisition? I talked to a marketer recently that said, hey, I've got a peer group that I get together with. All we ever talk about is acquisition. How do we get more users? So I think I wanted to make some important points that we all know, I think inherently and subconsciously, but sometimes we just need to put them out in front and say, oh yeah, that's right, retention is important. I mean, I think we all know that it's cheaper to engage an existing customer more and get them to come back and be repeat buyers and repeat purchasers than actually go acquire a new one. And this is what this webinar is all about. So with that, let's kick things off. And Richard, let's hear about your first point. Oops.
Sure. Thank you, Aaron. So, on the slide, it says, what are customers hoping for? And I think the important word is hope. Why did I talk about hope? The reason why I talked about hope is actually the strongest human emotion. And, I've had audiences of 500, 200 or 1,000. And I could say to the audience, I'll throw out, what is the strongest human emotion? And many times I hear fear, love, hate. Rarely do I hear hope until I say it, and then people realize that hope is the strongest emotion. And no one walks into a physical store or visits a website or engages with a company on their mobile device unless they're hoping something is going to happen. And it's beyond just having a correct or easy interaction. For instance, if your company is selling beauty care products, the transaction is more to the user than just the act of purchasing a product. The consumer might be hoping that your products are going to make them feel younger or get more compliments, or just put a smile on their face. And within the first few seconds of engaging with a company, their hope is either going to be diminished or fulfilled. So regardless of the channel, your brand basically has one opportunity to onboard customers with a personalized and welcoming message. And the 8 steps that I developed that I'm going to go through, including this one where we're talking about Make Me Feel Hope, they are all based on, number one, 30 years of customer research, because our business has been in business 30 years, or actually 31 years as of another month. And we have interviewed hundreds of thousands of customers to find out what is the key to customer retention. And the second part is that these 8 steps are also aligned with the psychological components. And the psychological components, they kind of fall into 3 general categories of hope, trust, and intimacy. But to flesh them out, I've developed these 8 steps. So I think you're going to be very interested in learning the other 8 steps. But Aaron, why don't you give an example of the first one?
Yeah. I think, we've seen there's a company in Indonesia called Tokopedia. It's their largest e-commerce company. It's millions and millions of users buy product off their site and mostly off their mobile app on a monthly basis. You talked about hope and what are the customers' expectations. what Tokopedia did, and you can see the stats here on the screen, but really what they did is they really thought through about how do we get people to onboard? How do we use the expectations in a way to give them that experience and create it in a personal way. So ultimately, again, I don't need to read the stats, you guys can see them, but they thought about the journey very specifically that the people would take through that onboarding experience, what they needed to see, what they needed to do, what their experience was going to be, and they designed it purposefully. Again, they were able to get some great results by applying, the what are customers hoping for and making them feel welcome concept.
So the next step is give me your full attention. And give me your full attention is a little different than in the physical world of walking into a store or calling into a customer service department. By personalizing the message, it allows customers to feel in control. And no customer, if they're going to be interviewed or if they were doing a survey, would say they want to be in control. But when they're out of control, they're not very happy with the company. And when customers are not recognized or feel that the brand doesn't know who they are, they feel frustrated and then they feel out of control. And customers basically, they crave attention and they need and want to feel that the brand is interested in them as a person and not just another user. So once again, Aaron, I think you have an example of this, a good example.
Yeah, we've got a company that we work with called Barry Banca. It's a clothing e-commerce retailer. And, kind of like to your point, Richard, I think that, there is this idea of, making them feel like you're listening to them. One of the things that Barry Banca was doing kind of a mass email campaign, right? Meaning like they would apply the concept of sending out the same email to all of their customers, twice a week or 3 times a week. And, again, that just doesn't make people feel special. So they kind of switch things up. And as you can see there, we're able to grow their engagement by 14% just by simply doing more segmentation, right? Male, female, and shoes versus tops, and really use the user data to make more personalized communication. So at the end of the day, they were able to deliver a much more, personalized experience, which really make the user feel like that they were paying attention to them.
That's an excellent example.
Yeah.
So answer more than my question. That's a critical component to creating and continuing and building upon the relationship. And our company has found that 95% of all customers who are delighted with an interaction state the associate or the brand or the company not only answered their question, but provided additional useful information. So I'll repeat that. Of all customers that were delighted, 95% say the primary reason was because not only was their question answered, but also they were provided additional and useful information. So by anticipating the customer's question based on their prior history and behaviors, it helps to build trust and demonstrates competency. And by predicting the customer's needs, you're able to create an experience that's unique and special to them.
Awesome, Richard. Yeah, we've had a company that we've worked with called Fave, and they were able to grow their customer lifetime value by 2x applying this concept. So essentially what they did is they used a flowchart tool that we have in our solution to really listen to what the customer's behavior was and what they were doing or what they were looking for, and just understanding the business and what those customers' needs were in advance. They could deliver them updates. They could deliver them guidance. You can apply the same concept to the idea of call center deflection, right? Kind of knowing that if somebody is going to do step 1 out of 3, tell them what they're going to be expecting in step 2 and 3 at the point of step 1 so that they know what to expect. And then if you can, even wow them even further beyond that. So again, the whole idea here is just thinking ahead, being prepared, and using technology to help you, communicate proactively with customers so that, again, they do feel like, you've you've given them exactly what they need.
So the next step is know your stuff. And know your stuff is all about, you come in hoping that the company can fulfill your needs or wants. And as you start communicating with the company, you build trust and competency. And it's true that the era of simple answers is over. I mean, anybody in the call center business will tell you 10 years ago, there was a lot of very simple questions that were coming into call centers. But now there's so much information on the internet that when customers or prospective customers actually engage with a brand, they expect them to have that knowledge base and to respond quickly and accurately. And customers like options. Everybody likes options. And options also give customers more control and further expand the customer, connection. Customers also expect you to know them, not just know the product, but to know them, their location, the product, their delivery preferences, your history, how long you've been with them as a customer, and things like that. They expect you to know that. So knowing your stuff is a combination of not only knowing your brand and your products, but also knowing your customer as well.
Yeah, great, Richard. I think we've seen a company called AOPOP do this pretty well. To your point, I think especially out in the market when leaders emerge in digital who are pushing the envelope when it comes to understanding customer data and then reflecting that back on the customer and showing them like, hey, we get you. I think that the rest of the market just has to follow suit. I think all of us right now have experienced getting an email or getting that retargeting ad that you've seen on the internet after you've bought something, right? That's a very simple example of, hey, why don't you guys know that I've already bought something? You're still showing me an ad for something I looked at, but you haven't made the connection that I actually purchased it. Now, again, I'm not going to say that that's not a trivial thing to solve for, but the whole idea is how can you use data, whether that be data that the end user give you directly, or whether it's data that you can infer, and then ultimately engage them in personalized ways. So AOPOP here did something very, very straightforward. It's something everybody can do. They actually created multiple segments of their users, and they used some artificial intelligence technology to personalize the content and the timing of the messages. So they knew the situation, like again, a cart abandonment scenario. They took content that was personalized, and then they took the time in which to deliver that content was personalized, and they also figured out what channel, email or push or SMS, was best. So ultimately, they took all of this thing into account to really create this experience, and the user, again, just feels empowered because they know that the brand is listening to them, even if they're not specifically saying, send me this content at 4 p.m. via SMS. So that's a great example.
And that makes sense. And listen, everybody loves product recommendation that's personalized, but when recommendations don't come close to the individual preferences, then you lost their attention and trust. Yeah. So the next one is don't say no. And no, out of all the emotions and all the steps, it's the only negative one, and it probably could take place anywhere in the 8-step sequence. But I did put it after the 4th step because when you say no, it's like a set of dominoes. You could have made the customer feel welcome, given them your full attention, answered more than their question, your stuff. But when you tell the customer no, then all those steps fall just like a set of dominoes. I often say that, no, which is actually a 2-letter word, the customer hears a 7-letter word, and that 7-letter word is goodbye. Because when you say no to a customer, it's the biggest killer of customer loyalty. And no in a mobile engagement world takes many forms. It's like not being recognized as a return customer, making it difficult to navigate the menu options, not making the entire process easy and hassle-free, or pushing messages out that are not appropriate for them. That's all forms of saying no. And when you don't treat customers as individual people, they get frustrated. And when customers get frustrated, they change brands, and basically you lost them forever because people are not going to come back to your brand. there's just so many choices. So you have kind of like one chance to make it right. And if you say no, you're destroying all the other steps that you built up. The next step is invite me to return. And I just want to bring into the broader category or definition of customer experience, because I think it's critical to this whole concept of invite the customer to return. I think when most people talk about customer experience, they might be talking about a specific interaction, whether it's on one channel or another. But to me, as well as many others, the customer experience starts with that first interaction with the company and should never end. And when someone walks into a physical store, buys a product on e-commerce, or engages with a mobile device, basically the customer experience is paused. If you think of like a play versus a pause button on your phone, it's critical that the brand thinks of a way to reboot that customer experience, to press play after it's been stopped. And what this does, it makes the customer feel wanted. Everybody likes to feel wanted, but if you don't tell the customer that you want to do business with them again and do it the right way, they feel that you don't want to do business with them again. So thanking customers for their purchases after the goods have arrived, not just sending them a confirmation order, providing personalized promotions and offers, and periodically keeping in touch through push notifications with meaningful messages. That shows the brand that you want to do, shows the customer that the brand wants to do business with them and appreciates their business. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Well, to kind of take an example that sums up those last 2 points of don't say no and invite me to return. We've got a company that we've worked with that we saw use some interesting concepts, and they certainly put some effort into trying to understand what they could do to keep people from leaving. Absolutely, right? Do the right things, say the right things, but inevitably in any business, especially new ones, right? You have to learn by failure, right? When somebody leaves and somebody says goodbye, what do you do with that information? You've got to use it in some way. It's valuable insight. So what HelpChat did is they actually said, okay, we're going to take data, we're going to use data, and we are going to find out how to engage people that left our company or no longer did business with us. And then in their case, that was either they stopped using the app or they uninstalled it altogether. And what they did is, because they had their email address, they built a multi-step email campaign to not only reach out to those people and survey them, but also they created this great feedback loop that once they got survey results and they kind of built a map of what are the things that they needed to do differently to keep people around, they went back to those people and they segmented them. They went back to those people and said, hey, you told us that you left because X, Y, and Z. Now we've made those improvements. Would you like to come back? Now, certainly they didn't get everybody back, but the point is there's a positive brand experience because they were able to show the user, show the customer that they were listening, and they made an attempt to correct the problem. So even if they didn't get them back, it could be that in the future they would get them back. So it was a great example of how to apply that whole don't say no and invite me to return.
Show me I matter. I think Aaron gave a great example with Berry Banca, how they were using mass mailings and it wasn't very effective. And show me I matter, I would say the biggest obstacle to showing customers you matter is if you're sending them these blast emails every day. 4 years ago on an e-commerce site, my wife and I purchased a beautiful set of candlestick holders from a very high-end, luxury store. And we asked through the e-commerce site, that we wanted it purchased as a gift. So if the department store brand was really smart and intelligent and understood their business and how to target customers, we should have been targeted as a customer, prospective customer who would purchase gifts again. Especially since they knew that we had a gift wrap. So the brand should understand that 4 or 5 times a year or 10 times a year, they should be sending us targeted emails, perhaps, we have weddings coming up or housewarming parties or holiday gift giving. This would show us that they understand us as a customer instead of sending these periodic messages. There's a retailer, I'm not going to mention the name, but that's just closed like 650 or 700 stores. And this retailer, and sometimes people say, well, why haven't you unsubscribed? Well, sometimes I don't unsubscribe just to get all this data or to feed it back to my clients. But twice a day, not just once a day, they send email promotions with 40% off. Well, sending customers email promotions twice a day, 40% off is I know for a fact that this retailer will be out of business in another 2 years. So mobile engagement technology, the advantage is that it does allow brands to communicate with customers anytime, anywhere, but the messaging has to be personalized to show them that your brand cares. And it's not a number game, it's a quality game. So it's much better to send your customer 10 push messages a year than send them 365 that are just going to turn them off. So that would be my advice if I was involved with your particular brand.
Yeah, great example, Richard. Well, I think we've got one too. The View is an online content video streaming service, kind of like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime, and they did the same thing. And I'm sure people have seen Netflix do the same thing. Like I get these emails like Friday afternoon, like this weekend, coming to Netflix, right? So they've got these are the 5 new pieces of content that based on what you've looked at in the past might be relevant for you, might be interesting. I mean, those types of activities are really what engages a customer, and really what you're keeping in touch with them, but you're also showing them that you actually care about what they're looking for. Like the fact that it's sent on a Friday means they're thinking about, what am I doing this weekend? Would I be interested? I think that's a great example. And View here does something very similar. Richard, I know that when you and I were chatting before, I think the example you shared about showing that your brand cares, you gave the example of, the purchase that you made, and ultimately, getting tons of emails for women's clothing, which just wasn't relevant to you. I mean, it maybe it's sometimes, but again, twice a day or 3 times a week, it shows them that they've taken no time to get to know you and to understand you.
No, absolutely. And Aaron, I think unfortunately so many companies have their their channels set up as separate businesses, and they don't really look at the customer as one single customer, and they take advantage of whatever channel they have. But it just doesn't make sense from a brand perspective. So yes, getting daily emails for ladies' shoes and handbags, unless I'm going to be buying presents for my wife every day, probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I just switched over to the next slide about surprising me in good ways. So why don't you chat about that?
Sure. This is the 8th step. And, surprise me in good ways is also tied into your best customers. So perhaps rewards program and loyalty program. So, of course, who doesn't want to be surprised? I do for sure. And surprising customers through mobile engagement, can definitely put a smile on their face, just sending them a message that's just kind of cute, or, it's your first year anniversary, and maybe your utility company, you just signed up, but they know you moved into a house a year ago, or it's your first order. These things just make a difference. Inviting loyal customers to regional events, sending them personalized messaging that's specific and relevant. They're just nice things to do. The milestones, I think, are a critical way to surprise customers. Frankly, I'm not a believer in the birthday message. I think that's kind of awkward. But as I mentioned, everybody who buys something on a mobile device or e-commerce, or if they have the information on when they bought something in the store, if you send them a message thanking them, it's been a year since your last purchase, and we're not trying to sell them more, but we really appreciate your business, that's going to make them feel special and wanted as well.
Yeah, agree. Well, I think, on that point, I mean, we looked at some very well-known loyalty and rewards programs. Starbucks using their Star Rewards program to bring people back into the store using the mobile app. Amazon Prime. I mean, probably everybody on the webinar today is an Amazon Prime member. I just get super delighted and surprised when I've got this obscure like outlet cover that I ordered the other day that was available same day. I'm trying to think, how the heck is that available same day, but it was. Even the pool supply store that's around the corner from my house that I went to get some chemicals the other day. They've got an app. I mean, it's a small chain nationwide, but they've got an app, and it keeps my chemical readings in there, and it keeps my points that advance. So every time I go drop $100 on chlorine tablets, I actually get points and can get additional items, and it builds up. And every once in a while they give me a free pool noodle or something, right? Which is just kind of fun. The kids love it. So I think those are just great examples of using data, thinking about the customer journey, tying in mobile to just create just surprising interactions. Richard, one of the other stats that I know you're a fan of is how big of an impact loyalty can have. I mean, we all know it's important, but we found this stat that says just simple small lifts in loyalty can really boost profits across the board. So again, just to hammer home the point of surprising customers, bringing them back, keeping them engaged. At the end of the day, it's just good business. So Richard, as we get close to wrapping up, I always like to kind of just summarize some big points for people as far as key takeaways. What are some of the key takeaways you'd like people to walk away from the webinar with today?
Sure. Well, I think a few key takeaways I'd like to share. Number one, and everybody knows this, but I don't think you can say it enough. There's more competition today than there ever was before, and customers in general are less loyal. So that's the platform, that's the baseline. I think the important thing to take away is that you can replicate as closely as possible the same experience that my father delivered, when I was just a teenager, on a mobile engagement device. And I know that I don't know if it was because when I went my parents sent me to summer camp and I didn't get too much mail. Of course, this was years ago, but I do appreciate and value when someone sends me a message that's welcoming and warm, and there's no reason why through mobile engagement technology you can't create, maintain, that emotional connection that will secure, customer retention and customer loyalty.
Great. I think mine really comes from the engagement we have with our customers. I mean, I talk to them often, try to understand what's working for them, what isn't. I mean, time and time again, what I hear in the tactical day-to-day things that they're doing is that it's all about relevancy. The more relevant you are to the user, the more engagement you're going to have, the more lifetime value, the more profit. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to relevancy. And our customers are thinking in, I think, 20 years ago, it had a lot to do with, okay, for the kind of people come into my store, how do I make sure that these products are relevant? But today, especially with all the different ways that customers can interact with you, whether that be in store for retailers, whether it be on the web, whether it be on mobile, I mean, it's now all of a sudden relevancy is not just the products, but it's also what's the channel, right? Do you want to check? Do you want to interact via email? Do you want to interact the web? Do you want to be mobile? What is most relevant? And then of course, then it's like, okay, well, what content, what information are you pushing out there that's going to be relevant to them? And then what's the most relevant time? And I think that data is making more and more of this possible. So I think for me, the big key takeaway is just be more relevant and take advantage of the information you have in your business to deliver that relevancy, and you'll see profits go up. So I guess with that, we're going to open the floor up to questions. Certainly appreciate everybody coming today, and again, we'll stick around for a few minutes just to go through some questions. But so in the webinar panel, feel free to type in questions. Richard and I can field them, and we'll wait for some folks to start typing some stuff in. Okay, we've got one here, Richard. Reading it here. I guess how would you differentiate between loyalty and retention? Do you make a distinction there? Do you not? I'd love to hear what you have to say about
That's a whoever asked that question. That was a great question. No, because a lot of people do get confused, and there is a nuance to it. The bottom line is that somebody could be loyal to multiple brands. You know, if you love shirts, maybe you're going to be buying shirts from 3 different brands. But if you create and build an emotional bond, the idea is to try to increase, wallet share from your existing, customers. So if somebody is, engaging with you 3 times a year, but also engaging with other of your competitors 10 times a year, how do you get a bigger part of that share? So it's really customer loyalty, customer retention, but it's increasing the frequency of repeat purchases and also the ticket value of those purchases. That's the ultimate test of true engagement.
Okay. Okay, got it. We got another question here. I think this is one that I can field. Question is, what is the best way for someone to feel welcome on mobile? Any examples? Well, let's see. That's a broad question, but again, the things that I've seen customers do is, it all comes down to understanding that customer and understanding, their journey. Sometimes that can be different for every customer. Sometimes, it is relevant to have everybody go through the same steps. But when it comes to making somebody feel welcome on mobile, again, I go back to using data to, as best you can, whatever data you have, to segment your audience and deliver relevant content to them in the right, sequence that ultimately drives the kind of behavior you're looking for. I mean, just something as simple as, if you've, well, let's take the gender distinction, right? If you've got an e-commerce app and you're selling both men and women's clothing, one of the things that if you can find out that you've got a male who you're onboarding, obviously, I forget who does this, might be Lucky Jeans, but they ask up front, are you interested in men or women's stuff? And they take you on, in their mobile experience, they take you, they save you from doing a bunch of taps on your phone to get to the men's stuff. It's literally like one button and then you're into it. So I just think that it all comes down to thinking about those user journeys intelligently and crafting, crafting the right engagement flow.
And one other thing, Aaron, I think that's an excellent example. If the message does come from a human and not a bot, using the person's name like Richard and then having them sign it like Alice or Mary, that also makes someone feel welcome. When they know it's not just a brand, but it's actually a person who's welcoming them to the brand itself.
Okay. Richard, here's one for you. As you interact with your clients, is there any kind of new tech or anything that you see out in the world that's kind of trending that your customers are asking you more and more about, or that you're paying close attention to, that maybe hasn't hit mainstream adoption yet?
Well, I don't know about that hasn't hit mainstream adoption. I think that I facilitate a lot of discussions about artificial intelligence, and I think the problem is too many people use artificial intelligence. They think that's going to be a cure-all to everything. So artificial intelligence is great. And frankly, most people do like to self-serve if it works. But when it doesn't work, they want to communicate, with, a human or someone who can, solve their problem. So I would just say, don't put all your money into artificial intelligence. Put some of your strategy and money into trying to create and build a relationship, with your customers. And the last thing I can say is, certainly everybody would probably agree right now that artificial intelligence was probably used, for Boeing's Max. And while artificial intelligence is great, I don't think anybody right now wants to depend on going onto that kind of aircraft. So that's the extreme, but I think it's important to build relationships.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I'm curious. This is the question from me to you. What about bots? I mean, I think you mentioned a little bit about chat bots. I mean, are you seeing some of your clients like kind of embrace chatbots, and what's the end user's, kind of take on interacting with essentially, again, an AI kind of driven
Sure.
conversation engine. Yeah.
Once again, I'm a believer in that. As long as the bot, if it quickly recognizes that it really can't answer the question, that it goes to a live bot. And I just recently that happened where I knew it was just a bot, but then they couldn't answer the question, and rather than asking me 5 more questions, it was immediately sent to a live agent, a live chat. So I think bot is appropriate at the first level, but then after that, I think it has to go to a person if it doesn't answer the question.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Got another question here. What would be the best way to improve retention in a context where we can't improve the product, the consumer journey, or the funnel, as they are managed by other departments with different priorities? And I can repeat that if you want me to, but I think that's a question where there's certainly some variables that are fixed.
Well, number one, I think I understand the question, but it's always important also to build and create relationships with internal partners as well. So perhaps it's possible to be more effective as a company if you use the same skills that we talked about, the same 8 steps in creating and building relationships with your external customers, to do those things with your internal customers too. And I think sometimes you might come up with some solutions, even if those other things are fixed.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would look for too is, like, if you look at, what can you do, right? And I come back to relevancy. I mean, if you really subscribe to the idea that relevancy equals more retention, could you, take the consumer journey and, I mean, could you message different segments of consumers in different ways? Even though the journey is the same, could you use slightly different language or wording? That would be, again, we can't get into a dialogue here. We just got a question, but I mean, I think those are some areas that I would be like, okay, well, what are the things you can change given the constraints, and see if you can find some gems hidden there. So, okay. Well, Richard, I think it's time to kind of wrap things up. I guess before we go, where can people, I guess, go to find out more about, your work and what you do, and maybe dig into a little bit more to these 8 steps?
Sure. Well, I am founder and president of the Center for Client Retention, but if somebody specifically, which is what this webinar is all about, wants to learn more about the 8 steps, I did write a book called The Endangered Customer: 8 Steps to Guarantee Repeat Business. And that book is on Amazon in audio, digital, and print. And it's a very simple book that's simple but revolutionary, that describes these 8 steps in detail. And there's examples for all the channels. So I would say it's an excellent tool if anybody would like to learn more about the 8 steps and how it might apply to any interaction or any channel, in addition to mobile engagement.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for attending today. I hope there were some good takeaways for you. Obviously, again, my name is Aaron with MoEngage. You can write to us at hello@moengage.com if you'd like to chat with us. And again, certainly hit us up on the internet. You'll see us out there in the world. So again, thank you very much, and take care. Enjoy the rest of your week, and go out there and start engaging.